Brooklyn Independent Television.
We are in the midst of one of the snowiest winters in the history of New York City. Even if you love the snow, week after week of the cold and the slush can start to take their toll. But for some people, it's the lack of sunlight that can be the real problem. More than just the occasional blues on a gray day. Here's Healthbeat's Sherry Carabin.
Yeah, I miss the daylight. We really miss, but you know what we can do.
Does it bother me when there's less daylight? Yeah. When it's dark outside, it feels like the day is already over. Like I didn't get to enjoy the day. I get tired earlier. I go to bed earlier.
I feel as though I need that sunlight to get me going, that vitamin D to make me feel chipper. So when it's dark, say 4:30, you get kind of down.
While these people and many others may prefer more light, for some the lack of sunlight and fewer daytime hours can add up to a more serious condition, known as seasonal affective disorder, or S.A.D.
Seasonal affective disorder is a subset of depression.
Dr. Pio Andreotti is a psychologist at Long Island College Hospital.
It is a form of depression that occurs during changes in the seasons related to how much sunlight would be available.
Although the condition is commonly associated with the winter and the lack of sunlight, there is a summer form as well, which generally begins in April or May.
Seasonal affective disorder can be related to an overexposure as well. It's changes in the sleep-wake cycle. They think that one of the major hormones that are related to changes in the sleep-wake cycle, which is melatonin, can affect it. So too much or too little can affect symptoms. People tend to have different responses to seasonal changes. They tend to have different responses to how those chemicals are working in their bodies.
What are the differences between the winter form and the summer form of seasonal affective disorder?
During winter depression, what you'll see is atypical symptoms of depression. You'll see an increase in agitation. You'll see an increase in weight gain. You'll see an increase in sleeping, an increase in frustration and irritability, and you'll see what is usually called leaden paralysis, where the bodies just feel so heavy, it feels like their bodies are made out of lead. And that's atypical. Usually in depression, what you see is what we call vegetative symptoms. So people tend to sleep less, they tend to not move as much, they tend to not be as agitated. Those are the symptoms you'll see during summer depression.
S.A.D affects between 4 to 6% of the U.S. population. It's about 4 times more common in women than men, and it generally begins in the early 20s.
10 to 20% experience what we call a subclinical version of seasonal affective disorder. So they might have some of the symptoms, but not all of them, but they're still pretty debilitating. And you'll see it in the northern regions, or regions that are more affected by winter, more affected by sunlight changes or seasonal changes.
Just how serious can seasonal affective disorder be?
Some people are as debilitated by seasonal affective disorder as they are by major depressive disorder. Some people feel as if they can't leave their homes, they feel worthless and rejected. There are the possibility of an increase in suicidal ideas. So if the seasonal affective disorder, if the S.A.D is getting that bad, it's usually very important that you seek treatment.
The good news is there are treatments available, including phototherapy, for those who suffer from the winter or most common form of seasonal affective disorder.
What they use is something called a light box. It's a specialized lamp, and basically people will use the lamp between 15 minutes to an hour a day, every day, and it's supposed to help simulate exposure to sunlight. While most of the literature says the time of day you use the light doesn't really matter, there are people who believe that simulating dawn or dawn simulation is more effective, so they'll suggest you do it first thing in the morning to kind of simulate the exposure you would get first thing from natural light.
There are also medications, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy, which looks at how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact. Both drugs and therapy can be very effective for those suffering from either type of seasonal affective disorder. The trouble is, making the diagnosis isn't always easy, since the condition must first be distinguished from major depression.
First thing you would look at is the history of symptoms. Looking at the diagnosis, you have to have 2 years, according to the diagnostic criteria, 2 years of recurrent symptoms around changes in season that you don't necessarily experience other times of the year. That's probably the biggest difference.
I like the night. I like the dark. I don't like daylight like that.
I feel happy all the time. No, nothing gets me down like that.
The lack of sunlight certainly isn't bothering these people. But if the increased darkness has you more than just a little bit down or is leading to excessive irritability or agitation, too much sleeping or eating, you might want to consult a doctor just to be sure you don't have seasonal affective disorder. For Healthbeat Brooklyn, I'm Sherry Carabin.
Follow us on Twitter at BK Independent TV.